And that's where I believe that making hiring more human starts. Is just a better baseline, setting those expectations so that all of us agree this is what good means and we know how to execute that.
Welcome to the Wellable Weekly podcast, where we cover the key topics and trends at the intersection of well-being, technology, and HR. I'm Jeff, and today we have a very special guest. Kibben is a keynote speaker, best-selling author, and top voice on LinkedIn on hiring. Kat has over 15 years working alongside top brands like Zoom, Monster, and Ollie. Kat teaches teams how to navigate change with confidence and build the kind of resilience that hopefully leads to better decisions. Their work has been featured in the New York Times, NPR, Forbes, and they're actually the author of 2 books, including This Was All an Accident and The Bounce Back Factor. So, Kat, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I guess the one piece of that I left out is that your current company is named 3 Ears Media, where I feel like there has to be a story there. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so 3 Ears Media is named after 2 dogs with 4 ears. And I always clarify that because the first time I didn't say that, I had a really wild conversation with someone whose dog's ear was amputated. I'm not even joking. But the reason my company is called 3 Ears Media is because I started my company in kind of a really quick moment. I literally did a spin in my chair and was like, what can I name this thing? I looked over and I saw my dogs under a blanket and I see 3 ears sticking out because I have a lab who has 1 ear that stands straight up and a little Boston Terrier with the 2 ears that stand up. And I was like, what if I do 3 ears? And honestly, it just stuck. From there, the domain was available, and here we are almost 9 years later.
You never know where inspiration will strike, right? And have
That's
to kind of lean in. So 9 years, right? And I mean, you're such a prominent voice, especially on LinkedIn, where I certainly spend some time. But how do you feel like you kind of became the go-to voice on the human side of hiring and recruiting, especially kind of in this age of AI?
Yeah. I have one of those resumes that looks kind of confusing, but if you see where I ended up, you know exactly how it all adds up. I started my career on the technology side, working for companies like Monster.com on their marketing strategy and kind of understanding the relationship between candidates, recruiters, and the technology that they use every single day. And from there, I kind of worked my way up, working with HR technology companies. And that's where the roller coaster got real because I also became a managing editor of a blog about recruiting. And for 5 years, all I did was talk to smart people and write about what they did. Really create those case studies, webinars, and events where people could learn from each other. And I think that's always been the most powerful thing in recruiting because there's not an education pipeline into recruiting. We can't assume every recruiter knows the same thing about hiring, what works, what doesn't, or the data that drives that. And so after that, I kind of got the itch. I went out and did it. And I did employer brand copywriting for some of the biggest companies in the world. And then I started 3 Ears Media to be able to kind of create my own path of training and education because I do believe we need to work on a better baseline in recruiting. And that's where I believe that making hiring more human starts. Is just a better baseline, setting those expectations so that all of us agree this is what good means and we know how to execute that.
It's interesting, what good looks like, right? And I feel like it's such a common process to put out a job posting, right? And there's so many different ways that you can do that now, especially through tools like LinkedIn, right? There's probably never been an easier way to get a job posting out there. And on the candidate side, quick applies, right, through pre-filled forms, and you have your kind of resume upload and things like that. In this day and age, what do you see companies getting wrong the most often about job postings? And then part B to that, what do you see candidates kind of misunderstanding or not quite appreciating about just kind of how to best approach the application process?
Yeah. Well, so starting with the companies, I think a lot of them say they want to stand out and they don't do anything different. Like you said, it's never been easier to post a job. It's also never been easier to create something that's generic, that doesn't mean anything, that says a lot without saying anything at all. And that is so obvious. I mean, just a few days ago, I searched a tool that I have that allows me to search 500 job boards, which is, this many if you think about the full landscape of job boards that are available. And I typed highly collaborative team player. Okay. The most generic cliche, we've all heard it in job postings, and it was found over 15,000 times.
Wow.
Okay. Just one example of how we're all using these buzzwords, but it doesn't actually mean anything. And I think that leads me to, and that's creating problems now because we have AI that's trying to match candidates with jobs. But candidates give too much value to those generic job postings, and they make one big faulty assumption that I find myself telling people all the time, is that they make decisions on if they are qualified based off of 100% of the job posting, when I actually don't think that recruiters, they actually believe that they need 100% of those things. And so they're tailoring their resume. They're telling themselves not to apply based off of that job posting, and really we should not be making decisions off of that. I tell people if you're 60% or more qualified, you should go ahead and apply.
That's so interesting. So on the employer side, do you feel like there's almost this perception of a level of table stakes, common table stakes that they want, majority of their candidates to have that are, maybe somewhat generic in nature, and that takes up so much of the posting that there isn't really much room for differentiation for that particular opportunity, and what would really make a great fit for a person who either has a certain set of skills or the way they approach work, and employees or prospective employees are just kind of getting lost in the ambiguity of a pretty sterile posting.
Exactly. And the detail that's missing, for those of you who are kind of like looking for the answer, it's the scope and scale of the work. If you've ever worked in a recruiting position, the reason we say no to people is because, yes, maybe they could do the job, but they can't do it in our scope at our scale. Meaning, you only have startup experience. I don't think that your skill applies at the enterprise level. Or this is a highly niche industry. This does not translate into our industry and our expertise. Funny enough, that's actually how I was navigating through my career, right? I went to monster.com where we were doing job boards. I was recruited into a company where you were hiring caregivers online because to them, they saw that job board translation. It was still hiring at its core. And that scope and scale is how both sides of the equation can start to identify what they're looking for and make that match. But like we were saying, it's so generic and it's usually lacking the scale to help someone actually understand what you need.
And that lack of specificity, likely, in some cases, it may deter candidates because they might not see a very specific opportunity that aligns with what they're looking for. But I guess on the flip side, it could also create a situation where more folks might apply to a job just because they generally meet some of the criteria and say, well, this could work. Like I'll get into the interview stage and maybe see how it goes. And I would think that kind of compounds, and maybe one of the reasons why, again, on LinkedIn, if you're posting a job, you may be receiving, hundreds and hundreds, or if not thousands of applications. And that's a lot for any employer to manage. And then on the candidate side, you're putting in your application that you may have worked hard on, but you're one of those hundreds or thousands who are hoping that your documentation, your submission has the right words or the right keywords to get through whatever screening filter is being used to kind of get you to the next round. I mean, how do you think? How have you seen, I guess, the use of LinkedIn specifically, kind of evolve, and how companies and I guess candidates who can manage all the noise and just sheer volume that exists on that platform in particular?
Yes, I love that you just asked that because I think so many people are talking about getting too many applicants, but they're blaming the wrong thing. Okay, so on LinkedIn, I think one of the two most common problems I'm seeing come up right now are that number one, volume. I got 1,000 applicants this week. Yeah. There's no way I could look through all of them. And every version of that conversation. And the second one is fraud candidates, right? We're attracting a lot. I don't even know if they're all real. Yeah. Now, I bring up both of those problems. I want to really emphasize the first one when I answer this particular question, because I think the too many candidates, we're blaming it on the wrong stuff. So I actually think your job post is the reason why you might be getting too many unqualified candidates, because none of us would be complaining if all 1,000 of those people were qualified, right? Right. We're working in a matching system. And if you're getting too many unqualified candidates, there's a very high likelihood that you're not describing the requirements well. Because again, it is a matching system, and some percentage of your applicant pool is a bot that said, I have these candidate criteria in mind. I'm looking at your job, and my matching algorithm says I am qualified for this, so I should submit application. That's kind of the logic of the machines that are working behind the scenes. And that is causing a longer term problem that I think most recruiters have not identified as their pain point yet, but they're about to, which is that job posting is an AI building block, and it is likely contributing to the fact that 95% of AI projects are defined as failures. And here's why. How are you going to create applicant qualifications if you never decide what qualifies an applicant and you can't explain it in a way that's so clear anyone could understand? How do you generate accurate interview questions if you never define the mandatory requirements? How do we right? I can keep going down your entire process. It starts with defining what you're looking for, and we are lacking so much sophistication in that area.
It's about doing the work up front, right? And taking the time to be thoughtful about the, so like you said, scope and scale of a job, right? So let's say that, an organization does get that part right? They take the time, they work with you to, put out a great job posting or something like that. And, they're still, getting a good volume of applicants, and they want to manage that, right? And so naturally there are tools that exist, many of them now, powered by AI, that are screening candidates, making recommendations, excluding, some. And there have been a lot of headlines recently about some of the innate challenges and deficiencies in some of these systems. What do you make of that, and how do you advise groups on how to think about using screening tools, especially those that are using LLMs for their processes, and how to be aware and manage some of those potential deficiencies? Yeah.
So I have seen a lot of poor execution, and I've seen kind of two ways where I think automation can really fit into that screening process and be highly efficient. And what I mean when I say efficient is they are getting accurate information for you, and it helps you make the decision, because machines should never be making decisions, right? So the first place where we screen is on the most basic criteria. So yes, no questions only that are very clear yes or no's. I think the mistake a lot of people are making are they're like, do you have collaboration skills? That's not a yes or no question. That is not universally understood. Do you have a visa or papers to work in the United States? Yes or no? That is a clear yes or no. Right. And so where I want to see the bot used is you get that first round, then we follow up with people to make sure that they meet our absolute minimum criteria for work. I call this like an intern level screening, meaning I would trust someone with zero recruiting experience to ask this question, get a yes or no answer, and be able to make a yes or no decision using that. Nothing more advanced than that. I think that's one of the big mistakes we're making right now. The second use of screening that I think can be really, really effective when you have a large pile is on your maybes. So you narrow down your 1,000 applicant pool, let's say to 200 people that you believe can do the job, but only 100% meet all of your requirements. The other 150 in that pile, you can use screening and bots to go out and clarify the criteria on which you were not sure. And the beauty of this, again, is if you really, really define up front what you need, it's really easy to generate the follow-up questions and be able to execute that at scale and customize that bot to get what you actually need, not what you think you need.
Mm-hmm. It's a good distinction, right? I think when you talk about the concept of applying screening tools, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing where it's almost the entire process versus just the initial stage where you're really just automating pretty rote or tedious work that clears out room for more thoughtful reviews of those maybe candidates, or really when you're even further down the candidate funnel, to be able to prep for those interviews and have really informed conversation with the candidates that you feel like are a good fit for that potential role. So is that one of the pitfalls that you're seeing? Is it's almost like over reliance on screening technology for more of that higher recruiting and hiring funnel than the maybe technology is really ready for right now?
Yes. And I think there are kind of two ways where that shows up is that we use tools for pre-screening when they're not asking the right questions. And it doesn't matter whether it's a tool or a person. If you don't ask the right questions, you can't get the right answers. And most of these tools are programmed to this kind of like belief of what good might mean at the largest scale. And anyone who has ever worked in recruiting knows that your use case is always unique in some way, whether it's the machine, the screen, the hiring manager, the process, whatever that is. And I think the second dimension is that we're not actually telling candidates, number one, this is a machine. And number two, how to thrive in an interaction with a machine. I haven't seen a lot of writing about this, and now my brain is swirling. I'm like, man, I got to write a blog about this. Is because we assume that people know how to talk to a bot. That's not true. We struggle to talk to other people, and we are people, right? So now take this to another dimension of performative behavior, in which if you send me and set me up with some machine, and I'm already feeling the pressure of an interview that comes with being a human who someone else is making a decision about, and then you put me in front of a bot and I don't know that I know how to do this, I'm kind of navigating the uncertainty of that interaction. People are not going to show up their best, which to me is, I kind of do the math that the people who show up the best are people who are good at making up answers, who are good at pretending to be confident, people who actually exhibit some cultural behaviors that might cause you some really negative consequences down the road.
Right. You're almost evaluating if they can pass this kind of very unique test in a vacuum versus can they actually do the job, right?
Right. And whose job is to sit and talk to a bot? Because that's actually what you're measuring at this point, I believe, is you are measuring someone's ability to sit and talk autonomously. And I actually can't think of anyone whose job it is to talk to no one. Seriously.
Hopefully that's not our future.
No, I can't do that.
So, I mean, you think beyond hiring, right? I mean, workers absorbing nonstop change, right? There's layoffs, there's RTO mandates, AI, reshaping roles, faster than a lot of people can reskill. And there's certainly a trust gap that exists, maybe more pronounced in certain organizations. But this adoption of AI, it's surged. As you pointed out, many, I think the stat you quote is 95% of those pilots have failed, right? Only 5% are really being successful.
That's an MIT stat.
Exactly, right. And so, how do you think that, I think I've heard you say before, or right before, about navigating change with confidence. So, what does that look like for your high performers out there when the ground just kind of feels like it keeps shifting?
Yeah. I think at the highest level, I saw an example from Bank of America this week that was really inspiring to me, is about upskilling isn't about technology at this point. Upskilling right now is about creating stronger behaviors in-house that machines can't replicate. So, for example, like Bank of America's education and upskilling on AI, the number one tenet is never trust the yes. I loved that. I
Yeah.
love that infrastructure, because I think that the first wave of AI education, and I'd be curious what you've seen, is that first wave of AI education has all been about skills. I'm sure you saw that wave, prompt, prompt, prompt. There's a prompt class, a prompt everything, right? And now I really think we're starting to realize that the quality of the prompt is not the problem. The quality of the human to decide if it is good or not is the problem that we are suffering from. And you can see that on all those LinkedIn bots who are like, I think that's such an interesting problem. And they all talk exactly the same way. Right? And I really think that's kind of the tenet. And then the second tenet is it's all about people, right? Now, I wrote my book, The Bounce Back Factor, before AI was everyone's talking about it and everyone's replacing everyone with all of this, right? And it is about how to navigate uncertainty with confidence. And I learned in a very, very unconventional way, okay? I sold all my stuff and I moved into a van. And I ran my company from the back of that van for 3 years. And what I learned from that is that, again, there's not some tool to figure out all of your problems. I think the van container for that problem made that very obvious for me, because the fixes that we have every day for people who don't live in vans don't apply to people who live in vans.
Yeah.
But it's tenets like remembering that you need to ask for help. It's learning how to change direction effortlessly. And sometimes it's even learning how to quit. But most people treat quitting like the big ugly Q word, and like you're not supposed to say that, because loyalty has somewhat like creeped its way in as well. And we all believe that you're supposed to stay at one company forever, but not too long. And there's just like so many dimensions of quitting.
That's interesting. I mean, so, this idea of allowing yourself the grace to quit, right? But also at the same time, acknowledging that like it is an uncertain time that we're living through, and things are changing quickly. And it's almost like I feel like you need to have a mindset with AI of, cautious embrace. Certainly, I love that, concept of like, don't just take the yes, right? And I think that's even more important in training, more junior team members who are, maybe learning about certain concept in business for the first time, and much of their on-the-job training is a combination of, hearing how other people may talk about, certain things around an office. That's just not happening the same way they used to, right? And so now they might be relying, again, on tools that could be giving them, somewhat generic or in some cases, hallucinated information. So, it's a real balance. I think at least the way we handle it internally here at Wellable, of encouraging people to, leverage new technologies, but don't do so in isolation. When you're taking on, a new project and you're trying to, experiment with Claude Cowork or something like that, truly doing that with others so you can kind of learn and notice things together, rather than feeling like it's just kind of you, interacting with this tool, directly.
Yeah. I find myself coaching my youngest employees a lot and asking them over and over again, like, do you like this? Do you think this is good? Right? And that human layer, we tried to get away from that because I think we didn't trust each other's judgment. And I think that's really the skill that Bank of America is trying to get out of their people, because that also, to me, is the long-term pipeline problem, is that if we never treat and teach our youngest employees about judgment, unfortunately, we will hit a wall at some point where we do not have high-quality people who know how to make high-quality decisions.
Right. And that's obviously what it's all about when it comes to people development and kind of grooming that next generation. Kat, one thing we always like to do as we kind of close out our podcast is a little bit of rapid fire questions. So I would love to get your kind of quick hit thoughts on a few things. One would be one thing that HR leaders should stop doing immediately.
Copying and pasting their old job postings and thinking that it'll just work.
It's time to dust off the job postings, and really make some
You can't tell me everything changed and then copy and paste to the thing you used 6 to 12 months ago.
Right. Yep. Okay, that's fair. So stop doing that. And what's an overrated hiring trend right now?
Overrated hiring trend. I gotta say, I think it's the interview bots. It's the
Okay.
screening. It's
Yeah.
thinking that we're getting some better outcome when actually we're just materializing and creating consistency around bias.
That's interesting. I mean, you can see the allure, right, for to the organization of kind of having a plug and play, automated tool to cut out, something that's just takes a lot of time. Have you heard of any organizations who again are thoughtfully using or incorporating the use of kind of pre-screening bots, or is it mostly just for that part of the process where it's like kind of going through some of those yes no questions?
I think Zillow is doing or excuse me, Zapier. Zapier
Zapier.
is doing an incredible job. Their recruiting team, like if you see any of them, follow them, get into their newsletters, all of that. I think that team has shared. They're actually the ones doing that follow up second screening.
Mm.
And overall, I think it's the teams that are focused on results, not speed. Speed doesn't matter if you're rushing towards the wrong result.
That's well said. I appreciate that. So a couple things, yeah, would love to maybe just share with our listeners where they can find you and some of the books that you reference, or just the best way to kind of learn more about your journey and kind of hear all the great things you have to share on these topics.
Yeah, so I am the only Katrina Kibben in the world. So if you spell my name right, you will find me. If you spell it wrong, you'll find a priest from the U.S. House of Representatives, and you will know that you are in the wrong place.
You're in the wrong place.
I definitely recommend. I have a blog that comes out every week over at 3yearsmedia.com. And on Tuesdays, we write about recruiting. And we always try to give one tip you can apply right now. No budget, no project, no nothing. And then on Fridays, I write a letter about life because work-life balance is an illusion. It's just you showing up over and over again.
Amazing. Love that. Well, thank you so much, Kat. I really appreciate it. Thank you to all the Wellable Weekly listeners. You can always find our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Also subscribe to the Wellable Weekly newsletter for all the latest insights. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.